With their backs against the wall, down 3-2 and facing elimination, the Spurs delivered yet another dominant win. But in a series that's been defined by the chess match between their defense and OKC's offense, Game 6 wasn't decided by adjustments. It was decided by execution, or a lack thereof from the defending champions. So what went wrong for the Thunder, and what can we expect to see heading into Game 7? That's what we're going to figure out in today's video, brought to you by PrizePicks. To understand where Game 6 went wrong for OKC, we first have to go back to Game 4, because that's when the Spurs made the decision to stop sending everything at Shai. Instead of loading up earlier, coming with a double, they'd give him space to start his attack, then have help defenders stunt at the ball before recovering to the three-point line. The Thunder attempted to attack this by using that space in the middle of the floor to set up pick and roll, to which Wemby picked up the ball early in high drop coverage. His goal was to keep Shai away from the basket without giving him space to work in the mid-range. By starting every play directly in front of him, the Thunder made his life a lot easier. He could sell out on the ball, take away the drive, without letting Isaiah Hartenstein roll behind him. At no point was he vulnerable in space. At no point were the Thunder a threat to get all the way to the rim. Shai didn't have room to get to his spots, and Hartenstein could only roll to about the free throw line before Wemby got back to contest. So in Game 5, they made a huge adjustment. Instead of playing from the middle, they emptied a side of the court for Shai to come off a screen going baseline, which left their offense with two major advantages to attack. On one hand, it made Wemby more vulnerable. When Shai turns the corner, he's isolated in space with an entire side of the court to work with. More importantly though, look at Hartenstein. Because Wemby gets pulled towards the baseline, he's able to get behind him on a roll. All of a sudden, the Spurs defense had to make tough decisions. When Shai attacked that space, Wemby had to decide between playing the ball or the roll. This time, Hartenstein gets behind him and seals the low man for easy points. With Wemby isolated in space, the Spurs had to start sending extra help from the perimeter, loading up in the paint early. So as long as Shai made the right decisions with the ball, the Thunder would find high-quality offense. It really seemed like they had figured things out, so I was expecting Game 6 to be all about how the Spurs planned to fix the problem. So imagine my surprise when they went right back to the middle pick and roll. Like clockwork, Wemby sells out to the ball, lets Hartenstein catch it in the short roll, and he has to float it up over a contest. That's a tough shot, but they went right back to it a play later. Remember, help at the nail is going to stunt at the ball. Castle makes Shai pick up his dribble, then recovers on a closeout. Chet does a great job of attacking the closeout on a drive, only to run into Wemby. It isn't really an advantage when that guy's waiting under the basket. Yet still, they went right back to it a play later. Wemby picks up the ball in high drop, shows his length, then gets back to Hartenstein and smothers a push shot. At the end of the first, they adjusted by moving the screen up near half court and angling it so that Shai could turn the corner and attack Wemby in space. Wemby continued to sit back, play the drive, and show his length. They'll live with a pull-up three. Watching this game back really felt like deja vu from Game 4. The middle pick and roll wasn't creating any advantages. They didn't go away from it. Shai was just running into Wemby. He could either settle for a long two or move the ball, to which Hartenstein had to get the ball up over Wemby. I just can't, for the life of me, wrap my head around it. In Game 5, they finally figured out how to get Hartenstein behind Wemby and force help from the perimeter, only to abandon that setup entirely, let the Spurs defend pick and rolls 2-on-2 and take away the rim. It wasn't until the third quarter that they ran their first empty side pick and roll of the game. Turns out the Spurs did adjust. Instead of a high drop, they had Wemby all the way out in a hedge to force the ball out of Shai's hands early. Here's another example. Shai turns the corner and both weak side defenders cheat to the paint early while Wemby commits to the ball. Then they recover to shooters, run them off the line, and get to their normal rotations, moving on a string to not let the Thunder get a clean look. A few minutes later, OKC went back to it, but against Luke Kornet. Shai knows he can attack Kornet in space, so he keeps his dribble live and waits for an opportunity to attack baseline, where he draws a foul. Again, the true advantage here though is that Hartenstein is able to roll behind the big man. Because they got more aggressive at the point of the screen, the paint has to collapse earlier, and I think the Thunder missed an opportunity to exploit that throughout this game. Because there are so many ways to take advantage of an empty corner. I especially love this set, where Hartenstein fakes a handoff to Shai before setting up pick and roll with Caruso. They know Castle isn't going to help from the corner, which puts pressure on the weak side and leaves Casey Wallace with a wide open look from three. This time they're going to empty the opposite corner to eliminate help. Caruso sets a down screen for Wallace to go run pick and roll. There's nobody to tag Hartenstein as he gets free for a lob, then misses a dunk. That's pretty similar to this play from Game 5. Wemby gets matched up with Chet and they set up an empty corner pick and roll. Because Castle isn't going to leave Shai, Caruso has an easy lane to the paint. Now Wemby's isolated. Chet rolls behind him, catches a lob, and it isn't a clean dunk, but he puts it down for 2 points. I would have liked to see more of that in Game 6. In general, just using the corners to apply pressure. That's what worked for them in Game 5, especially when they went to 5-out lineups. Again, going back to game 4 for a second, the Spurs wanted to keep Wemby low, meaning he'd switch matchups behind the play to stay as close to the baseline as possible. That way, he can always help. The Thunder had to find a way to remove him as the low man, put him in positions where he can't just roam over from the weak side. How do you do that? By attacking on his side of the court, creating rim pressure, and kicking it out to the corner. So that became one of their biggest points of emphasis. It's almost impossible to help from the strong side corner without giving up an advantage, which made it easier for ball handlers to get downhill and score in the paint. The Spurs stuck with this coverage in game 6. When OKC went 5 out, they kept Wemby low, switching matchups and staying as close to the basket as possible. There was just one major difference. Lou Dort was in the game. Dort is the one guy on their roster who San Antonio at this point is still comfortable leaving open, so the Thunder lost their advantage. When they swing the ball to attack Wemby on the strong side, he just commits to the ball and lets Dort shoot. He shot 1 of 9 from 3 in 22 minutes. On this play from the first, they clear some space for Shai to attack on Wemby's side of the court. But look at him, he's not worried about the corner at all, just walling off the driving lane. Dort tries to attack him in space, but that's not exactly the most efficient form of offense. That's not to say the Spurs didn't do a better job of executing. This time Dort isn't in the game, but when Shai tries to get to Wemby's side of the court, Carter Bryant does a great job of pushing him towards the middle. Then he slides his feet to cut off an angle, absorbs contact, doesn't overreact to any fakes, and forces an extremely difficult off-balance jumper. Here's another example. He wants to attack Wemby in the corner, but Vassell doesn't let him get there. He contains the drive and pushes him out. Shai is once again forced to settle for a super tough jumper. And for the most part, that's what Game 6 looked like. Shai would start up top, then they'd clear as much space as they could in the middle of the floor. The Spurs basically dared him to beat their shell with jumpers. But before we get into what that looked like, I want to take a second to thank PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. If you know you can play responsibly and you have the means to do so, PrizePicks is America's #1 app for sports picks. So if you're looking for a place to get in on the finals, use code HMA and get started. Anything can happen. It's game 7, but we know what the game plans are. The Spurs want to funnel shots to Hartenstein. He's had at least 10 points in 4 of the last 5 games, so we're taking him for more than 10 again. On the other side, Castle has been San Antonio's second most important player. You can bet he'll be on the court and involved in everything. He's averaging 18 a game in the series. We just need him to go for more than 11.5. And it's that easy. Find the stat you want, pick more or less, and you've got your lineup. If you sign up for PrizePicks with code HMA and play $5, you get $50 in lineups instantly. So either download the app or click the link in the description to get started, and let me hear your picks down in the comments. In a series that's been defined by floor alignments, the setup OKC fell in love with was a flattened baseline. They'd put nobody on the wings and give Shai the middle of the floor to work with in isolation. Remember, the Spurs aren't going to load up early or send a double. He's going to have room to go one-on-one. The question is whether or not he can win his matchups. He did it in game 6, and he really hasn't in the series. I do think some of it is just that he's missing shots we all know he can make at a high clip, like this middle pick and roll against Cornet. He does a great job of using his body and slowly navigating space. This is a shot we've seen him hit 1,000 times. It's not just that though. The Spurs defenders deserve a ton of credit, especially Stephon Castle, who has the agility to cut off drives, the strength to absorb contact, as well as the deceleration and body control to stay attached to all of his moves. Even beyond Castle, Devin Vassell has also had some really good moments, not giving up any angles and using his length to contest jumpers. Of course, this is all insulated by the help behind the play and the fact that Wemby's patiently waiting for him at the basket. Needless to say, he's been turned into a volume jump shooter, more than ever. And through 6 games, he's made just 26% of his threes. That's not a reliable option to fall back on. Instead, he's been living in the mid-range, especially long twos. He's attempted 12.5 mid-range shots a game. He's only made 36% of them. That's almost 20% worse than what he shot in the regular season. I truly think Game 7 will come down to how he operates in the middle of the floor. Can he hit shots to beat the Spurs' coverages? And more importantly, can he make the right decisions when he does draw help? Like on this play, getting Wemby to commit to a drive, finding the open man to force a rotation, and leaving Jay Will with an open corner 3. They need more of that. In Game 6, he wasn't consistently hitting those pressure points. Along with OKC shooting themselves in the foot with their game plan, this was just a disastrous offensive performance. It was over before the third quarter even ended. Through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, the Thunder had a 126 offensive rating during Shai's minutes, almost 14 points better than average. In Game 1, they got held to just 99. The Spurs' initial game plan did a number, but they figured that out with their spacing, posted back-to-back masterpieces, only for the Spurs to counter with all of those Game 4 adjustments, no longer sending 2 to the ball. Then you have the Game 5 from OKC, where they started attacking an empty side and using the corners, only to fall right back off a cliff in Game 6. They just could not score with Shai on the court. In my opinion, most of Game 7 for the Thunder will be getting back to what worked. That means running more empty side pick and roll, force Wemby to make decisions, and force the Spurs to load up early behind the play. It also means attacking the baseline in general. One thing I didn't bring up was that anytime Shai isolated from the corner, Wemby would double from the weak side. That was another way to get the Spurs into rotation, and we saw it a few times in Game 6. With Wemby helping early, Fox is forced to defend the weak side 1-on-2. It's on Shai to recognize the advantage, skip it cross court, and make them close out to shooters. Which brings me back to the root of everything, his decision making. There's no settling into the game. On this play from the first quarter, he has an opportunity to attack an empty side. He has to know when to assert himself, instead of getting rid of the ball and letting the Spurs set their defense. At this point, all the chips are down. The adjustments have been made. This series has been defined by the chess match between a suffocating San Antonio defense and an extremely well-coached, diverse OKC offense that's consistently found answers. Who's willing their team to the NBA Finals? Will it be a unit led by the first ever unanimous Defensive Player of the Year, or the back-to-back MVP who rises above the chess match?